This video is sponsored by this shirt. If you'd like to help support this channel, you can buy my shirts at beunified.com. We have the Finches Get Cinches collection and the Ask the Mask collection to make up shirts, mugs, hoodies, and much more. About a year ago, I showcased a website that I'm still quite obsessed with called Backlogged, where basically you can review games, create lists to categorize them, see other people's reviews, and it's still one of my favorite sites to go to this day. Now right here is just the games on the website that are sorted by popularity, so these are some of the other people's favorite games, and spoiler alert, some of these will appear on my own list, but if you haven't checked out Backlogged yet, you should check it out. Not sponsored, just genuinely love the site. Anyways, how this is going to work is I'm going to pull up the list, and one by one, I'm going to explain just a little bit about the game, a mini review if you will, while also playing some of the game trailer with it. And with that, let's get started. First up is Mercenaries. What I love about this game is just building up alliances with different nations and making enemies with others. Next up is Civilization 3, a pretty jank game, but what makes it stand out against the other civilizations is that you can stack as many units as you want into one tile to make some very chaotic fun. Gartic Phone. This one's pretty recent, but it's basically drawing-based telephone, which I played a lot with physical paper anyway growing up, and so naturally when a digital version came along, I loved it. This one's great. Civilization Beyond Earth. Not one of the prettiest Civilization games, but utilizes some cool PvE mechanics that you don't see in other Civilization games. PictoChat. Not so much a game, but gosh dang did it entertain my time before I had a cell phone. F-Zero. I got introduced to this one when I was a little bit older, but gosh dang is it a fun one just to pick up and put down whenever I want. Pokemon Trading Card Game. I loved the physical version, playing with those with my friends, and then when I found out there was a video game version too with a pretty cool UI, I actually really enjoyed it. Pokemon Stadium 2. An easy way to play multiplayer Pokemon without a link cable. Rock of Ages 3 carries that Rock of Ages aesthetic while also introduces a pretty cool course creator. The Force Unleashed, specifically on the Wii, with the Wiimote controls, probably jank playing now, but I loved it growing up. Bug Snacks, yet another newer entry, but one that I'm quite fond of. It's basically Red Dead meets Muppets, and I'm a fan. Steep, not just the best snowboarding game I've played, but also the game that really introduced me to realistic sport games that I actually enjoy. Pokemon Snap. Not a ton to it, but it's really cool that you can use Pokemon to learn more about composition skills. Kirby's Adventure. It's one of the few Kirby games I've played, but if all of them were as good as this, then gosh dang, I would play a lot more. Red Faction Guerrilla. Man, this game just lets you approach any mission the way you want to, whether it be stealth or exploding up buildings, and actually those are the only two things, but gosh dang is it fun. Hades. Beautiful art style, lovely music, and a genre that I otherwise don't really enjoy that much. It's kind of something to be said about that. Super Mario RPG, one of the few RPGs I actually enjoy, and a way to make turn-based combat actually interesting. Drawn to Life: The Next Chapter, a game that was advertised as more of a drawing adventure, but should have been capitalizing on its excellent use of storytelling and great music. GoldenEye 007, classic Nintendo 64 multiplayer, one that I probably remember fondly more than what I actually want to play, but I do remember it fondly. Stick Empires, the first game I actually followed the devlogs from its conception to its release, and surprisingly still has players today, even though it's a Flash game, and Flash doesn't work anymore. You gotta freaking download a program for it. But gosh dang, you can still find hundreds of people playing, and it's still a blast to this day. Also the first game I've ever streamed. Metroid Prime Pinball. I don't play a lot of pinball games, but when they're hooked up to Metroid Prime music, how can you go wrong? It works great, it's a lot of fun, frankly it's hard to put down. Mega Man X, so action-packed and fast-paced that you'll feel like you're speedrunning even when you're playing slower than most of the people who actually play the game. Also really killer music. Celeste, a game that's able to echo thoughts and feelings of social anxiety and depression and many other relatable things that a lot of people feel and present it in a very beautiful yet challenging package. A Hat in Time, a true spiritual successor to the collectathons of the early 90s, even if it's not the most sound game out there. Mario Kart DS, a lot of fun tracks and 8-player download play. You can't really beat that. Super Mario Sunshine has some strange difficulty decisions, but ultimately has extremely precise platforming that works well in the world that it's created for itself. Super Smash Bros., the classic, the bossa nova music, the awesome sound effects, you can't go wrong. Pokemon White 2, one of the last Pokemon games that really captures the level of difficulty that I prefer to have in Pokemon games. Orcs Must Die 2, a great PvE spin on your usual tower defense formula to make just a fun experience of bashing a bunch of Orc Skulls. Thank you. Metroid Dread. May not be the most powerful 2D Metroid out there, but definitely a solid entry in the list and one we've been waiting for a very long time. I also love Metroid. Tony Hawk Pro Skaters 1 and 2. Never played the original, but absolutely love the HD remake. Wii Sports, probably the most accessible motion-based game out there that I can still pick up any time of the day. WarioWare Inc. Mega Party Games. Whether or not this is better than other WarioWares, I'm not sure, but gosh dang, it's the one that I grew up with, and it's so much fun, a blast of absurdity, and can make any of your friends laugh. Quite a party pleaser, to be honest. Banjo-Kazooie. While I don't have a ton of nostalgia for this one, I love its genre, and I do feel like this is an excellent entry into that genre, and maybe one of the best we've ever had. Sea of Thieves, a classic, rare, charming game that gives me so much joy in searching the seas that I haven't felt since Wind Waker, and honestly, I can spend hours in this game. It's hard to get me to stop. You can ask my friends. It takes 2, and it also gets 2 thumbs up, because this game is incredible, a great use of platforming, cooperation, and minigames. It's hard to find a single flaw with this game. It's absolutely tremendous. Pokemon Diamond version, a great game for the Nintendo DS, and especially when you have friends with them, because the multiplayer options are some of the best in the Pokemon series, if you ask me. Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. I absolutely love Tycoon games, and I just think this is the best Tycoon game to have ever existed. It's so much fun. Rock of Ages 2 Bigger and Bolder, my favorite of the series, and has an absolutely amazing skee-ball mode that my friends and I still play to this day. The Legend of Zelda. Still haven't beaten it because gosh dang it is hard and I don't want to look it up, but it is a lot of fun from what I have played, and I hope to finish it at some point. Metroid Samus Returns. This game is probably going to get overshadowed by Dread for the rest of its life, but it was the true return to the classic Metroid formula that we'd been wanting for a very long time after a couple of dud Metroid games, and it deserves a lot of appreciation for that, and it utilizes the Nintendo 3DS system awfully well. Donkey Kong Country. Tremendous music, great visuals, sometimes a little bit difficult and rough around the edges, but it's ultimately great. Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. A little bit more difficult than the first, but also a little bit more polished in a lot of the gameplay areas, and some cool new features that wasn't in the original, making it just a little bit better. Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. I just really like the atmosphere of this game, and it takes the difficulty back a notch, which is personally more suited towards my likings, which is why it's a little bit higher on my likings list. Donkey Kong 64, a game that I cherish so much that I took it with me to my bed when I slept sometimes. But also a game that I have since been able to look at in a more critical view, and I kind of credit it for opening me up critically towards games in general. So a very important one in my journey of understanding gameplay, as well as just other pieces of art. Smash Bros. Melee, a game I loved playing growing up. Nowadays, I don't like playing it as much, but gosh dang, I love watching it, and it deserves a lot of credit for that. Donkey Kong Country Returns. It had been way too long since we've had a side-scrolling Donkey Kong game, and this one really blew it out of the water mechanically, musically, and of course revived the whole side-scrolling Donkey Kong series. So, tremendous. LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. Still the best LEGO game that I've personally played, and that includes the new LEGO Star Wars. And after playing that one, I had even more appreciation for this one, which I grew up loving and cherishing anyways. Portal, a game that introduced a relatively simple concept that really changed how we think about puzzle games moving forward, but also just a nice solid adventure that's easy to understand the mechanics of. It's very fun. We made it to the halfway mark, and now that we're on game 50, I'm going to be spending a little bit more time on each game, so bear with me as I give a little bit more in-depth thoughts moving forward. Number 50 is New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS. A great side-scrolling adventure that also had awesome mini-games on the side. Even though a lot of them were ported over from Mario 64 DS, they still had a couple of originals in there. But also it had a killer side-scrolling multiplayer that not a lot of people talk about, but it's honestly one of the funnest parts about the game. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I have a lot of nostalgia for this one, but even to this day, with games that are a lot more mechanically sound coming out after it, I can still appreciate a lot of things that Brawl has done that other Smashes simply haven't, such as Subspace Emissary, a opera-based soundtrack, and just various other small little things that aid both the single-player and multiplayer experience, even if the multiplayer is definitely hindered by some baffling gameplay decisions. But ultimately, still a lot of nostalgia for it, and still a lot of cool things that Brawl does that not a lot of other games do, and for that, I have to give it credit for. It's fun. It's just a lot of fun. Star Wars Battlefront, a game that showcased large battles unlike any other, with IPs that we are already huge fans of. I don't think I've cared so much for feeling like you're in Star Wars, except for the Battlefront games, because they really do make you feel like you're on a battlefield with your friends, and tremendous fun every time I play it. Galactic Conquest is also a classic. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. It might be strange to even put a Call of Duty on the list given just the oversaturation of the market, but Modern Warfare 2 played a lot into my childhood as well as just my young adult life. I kind of revisited it later, and it was a lot of fun when I played. There's a lot of things that still drive me crazy, and it's hard to pick up nowadays, especially after I've become more fond of some more PC-based shooters, but gosh dang, those memories are priceless. It also just has some maps that are so classic, like Terminal. You just can't beat Terminal. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time HD. Now, when it comes to remakes on my list, pretty much any of them could be interchanged with the original, but I do like to present the version that I enjoy the most, and the Ocarina of Time 3D one simply has some quality of life changes that make the game much more fun to play, but also having it on a mobile system was really neat, while just visually looking more appealing than the N64. This game was also quite revolutionary, and I actually joined a podcast over on the Bad Elephant Gaming's channel to talk about its legacy specifically, so you can check that out if you so desire. Red Dead Redemption 2, the game with the best writing and voice acting that I've seen ever, hands down. It's not even close for me. Definitely very slow at some parts, and QuickTime events are typically something I have a hard time getting past, but I just cannot deny the incredible atmosphere and levels of exploration and even just NPC interaction. I don't know how you could make that any better. Red Dead Redemption 2 is just a classic and also has some multiplayer that will be very entertaining for quite a while. Pikmin 3, an incredibly solid entry to the Pikmin series, while also really utilizing the controls of the Wii U, both with the remote and the gamepad itself, incredibly well, and introduced some cool Pikmin that I like a lot. The only thing that kind of holds it back for me is just how short it is. Other than that, Pikmin 3 is an absolutely stand-up title with some really cool multiplayer modes. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. This game still remains the game I've ever been most hyped for. Coming off of Brawl, we really were ready for something a little bit more fast-paced, and even though Smash 4 has some of its bizarre choices in gameplay, just the vast difference between Brawl and this one was astonishing gameplay-wise, and it really reignited Smash in my fascination. I was so excited for it that I actually got the 3DS version, and both of these games include some cool features and modes that aren't in other games that I would love to see make a return at some point. The biggest one being Smash Run on the 3DS, a game with some really, really, really good potential, just needed some slight tweaks to make people remember it a little bit more, but if we could get a fully fledged Smash Run, it would be absolutely incredible. Also, multiplayer Smash Run would be tremendous. But Smash Brothers for the Wii U, still very fun, cool stages, cool characters, a lot of things we take for granted now that we have Ultimate, but gosh dang, still a great time. Star Fox 64 3D, again, could be replaced with Star Fox the original, but the 3D adds some cool quality of life changes like saving. That's a big one. A big important one is saving. Come on, I really wish we had saving the original. But anyways, I love the secret pathways you can take that determines your whole playthrough, and then you play through it again and just decide to take different routes here and there. It has enough secrets to make its relatively short storyline actually end up being a lot longer because of all the replay value. Also, I remember playing the multiplayer, even though it was kind of crappy, until like 3 a.m. at night with my friends, and it was so much fun. And the 3DS version actually makes good use of the 3D, having the laser beams go straight towards you. It's very cool. Love it. Metroid Prime 3, probably the weakest of the Prime series, but definitely holds some cool things that weren't in the original, such as utilization of your gunship, a kind of neater approach to Metroid lore. Even if it's a little bit different, it's kind of cool to have a little bit more of a character-driven Metroid game, and it's way better than the other character-driven Metroid game. But a lot of fun. They introduced the Wii Motion controls that work great for Metroid Prime, and I guarantee you this won't be the only Metroid Prime you find in this list. Team Fortress 2. It's kind of easy to let this game get overshadowed by its current state in 2022, but if you think back to when this game first came out, or even several years after it, it has quite a few lives of some very lively gameplay in it, and has always had a level of charm that's been unmatched by many other games. Having each of these characters be so interesting in their own ways makes selecting them more than just picking a class. Sometimes you just want to pick a character, not necessarily a class. And Team Fortress 2 supports that. But also the game is very revolutionary in the gaming scene, because a lot of games then built off of its gameplay mechanics to make other really fascinating class-based shooters. And to this day, still a soft spot for it, even though it's a little tougher to play nowadays with all of the bots and hackers going around. But still fun. Super Hot VR. Now, you could also put the regular Super Hot on here, but once you try Super Hot VR, it feels like it's the way the game was meant to be played. A really neat way of introducing movement while also somehow fast-paced and slow-paced strategizing at the exact same time. It's relatively short, but honestly, I don't think that's a problem. Finding the different ways you can kill people in the VR version specifically is tremendous, and also one of the least nauseating games on VR I've actually played. So highly recommend it if you have a VR headset. Super Hot VR is a must. Stardew Valley, a game that somehow made doing daily farm chores extremely fun. This isn't the kind of game that I'm usually into, but Stardew Valley has a way of making the player entertained 100% of the time, and I think it's because there's so much to do in the game, but also you have the daylight time that slowly goes down. So you're constantly having to pick and choose and prioritize certain things to do, which just keeps you stimulated, and it never feels like you have to wait for anything, despite there actually being a timer. Most games nowadays that introduce an internal clock usually encourages more waiting time, but this game simply has no waiting, not to mention the music, the awesome social aspect. It's just an absolutely pleasant time, kind of tough to pick up in the middle of a game, but restarting your game is always super, super fun. Next up, we have the original Pikmin. This game isn't only high because it was the original at introducing bizarre combination of aspects to build a genre that we haven't seen for anything else. It's not high on this list just for that. It also stands out amongst the other Pikmin games by having a kind of interesting ticking timer, where you actually only have a certain amount of days to collect everything. Probably not something that would be sound for every game, but it works pretty well in this game to kind of just get you on your feet and constantly collecting things to add a little level of stress. It might not be something I prefer for every Pikmin game, but it exists, and it's cool that it exists. Very neat game. Shovel Knight, more specifically the Treasure Trove version, because that's just the version that I ended up playing. Absolutely tremendous, borderline flawless 2D platformer. It's not only flawless in level design and item usage, but it's also flawless in the sense that it really teaches the player how to play the game to the extent that you don't actually feel like the game ever kills you. If you ever die, it feels like it's kind of your fault. Basically the exact opposite of Elden Ring. I think it's going to be a long while before there's a 2D platforming indie game that's able to triumphant Shovel Knight, which is a game that honestly is able to combat many of the Mario side-scrolling games to this day, all while being an indie game. It also opened the floodgates for many other indie games to be popular. It's kind of one of the frontier runners for the whole indie game market. So it gets some credit for that. It's beautiful, great soundtrack, just an absolute blast. Nintendo Land, a game that we desperately need a sequel for on the Switch. It also has Metroid Blast, which is an incredibly fun both ship fighting and land fighting experience with friends. And basically everything that you do with friends on here is a fun mode. Some of the single player stuff is a little bit weaker, but I genuinely had lots of enjoyment playing any of the multiplayer modes, and the Donkey Kong minigame is absolutely incredible. Terraria, a game that has brought so much fun to cooperative boss battling, and I don't think I've felt that for any other game before. To be frank, there's a lot of areas of Terraria that I don't know that much about, and that's because it's just an incredibly massive game, and it requires a lot of level of research both inside the game as well as externally, which I think maybe could be a bit of a hindrance. The amount of items you can collect and the amount of bosses you can fight just gives a different experience every time you play, and is able to perfectly capture intensity with item collecting and more intensity, and some creativity and then more intensity. It is a great time though. It's just probably best you play with someone who knows what they're doing, because gosh dang is there a lot to learn in that game, but still lots of fun. Tabletop Simulator, a game that basically says, yeah, we'll literally be good for any board game you throw at it because we have an actual 3D space where you can move pieces around. Any questions? Nah, it's actually incredible. And honestly, the most incredible part about it isn't necessarily the game itself, but the Steam Workshop, which has actually recreated so many classic board games that you can now play online in your desk chair without having to worry about setup and teardown. Coming from a family that's full of absolute board game geeks, me being kind of one of them, it's really nice to see a system where I can play games so fluidly in a digital format, and I just find that extremely enjoyable. Also, someone in the workshop recreated HeroScape, which is a discontinued game with very expensive pieces, and it's so much fun to play on the digital version. Tabletop, it just does exactly what it has to do, and it's incredible. Kirby's Dream Course, a really bizarre and strangely competitive Kirby game that has some of the best usage of isometric top-down visuals that I've seen. It's really hard to explain what makes Kirby's Dream Course so much fun. Part of it is the competitive value, part of it is the music, part of it is the precise golfing mechanics that actually surprisingly have a pretty high skill ceiling. And part of it is just that you get so many laughs out of it. But ultimately, Kirby's Dream Course is a game that I don't think I would ever turn down if someone asked if I wanted to play it. The answer is pretty much always yes. Like, call me, you know? Metroid Fusion, a tremendously executed horror twist to the Metroid franchise, and also the only Metroid game that I took speedrunning to a relatively serious level. And part of that is just because the game is already kind of slower paced, which is one of my only maybe slight dislikes towards the game. There's a lot of unskippable dialogue and a lot of directing the player where to go. But when you start speed running through it, it kind of speeds things up. The visuals are incredible. The main villain is scary, and even just the way Samus interacts with walls by holding on and being able to aim the gun in certain directions, it's the first time Metroid was introduced to that, and definitely deserves some accommodations for it. I absolutely love Metroid Fusion. Super Mario Maker on the Wii U, a game that was probably watched more on YouTube than actually played, just given how little people had a Wii U. But the time people spent to make levels and upload them was truly inspiring, and it also acted as a tool set for a lot of people who needed a creative itch to scratch, myself included. Anytime a creative game like this comes along, I usually jump on it to see how it mechanically feels, and I think of all game building games that I've played, Super Mario Maker does a tremendous job of it. Personally, the Switch version was a little bit disappointing to me just because it didn't suit the non-stylus touchscreen as well. I feel like the gamepad just worked better than you could possibly imagine for the Super Mario Maker creation part. Leads me to just much prefer the Wii U version, and remember the time where a bunch of creative minds got together to create some extremely cool levels in Mario Maker. Metroid Zero Mission, a game that uses the mechanics from Fusion, but puts it into a little bit more of a free-range Metroid style game. It's a remake of the original game, and the original game was extremely free-range, so it has this nice mix of modern and old, and just executes it very well. I also just like the general pacing of this game better than in Fusion, just because a little bit faster paced, and there's just some small things like that that make Zero Mission stand out amongst Fusion, even though both are pretty neck and neck in terms of quality. Mario Super Sluggers. I really don't know if anyone else would put this game as high as I put it, but gosh dang, do I absolutely love this game. Another one of those games that if anyone asked me to play, I would always say yes. My brother and I have spent countless hours playing this, and every once in a while, it feels almost like a once-a-year celebratory thing at this point. We'll break it out again, play a few games, and the level of intensity and coordination that you have to have with your thumbs and pointing at the screen, it's all very much a pumpkin down the garbage disposal, but for some reason, it's maddening how fun this game is, and I absolutely love it. Civilization 5. It's not uncommon for people to have this be their favorite Civilization game, and there's good reason for that. It is definitely the most sound Civilization experience, and some people even argue that the series could have actually stopped there for at least 10 more years before making another one to improve some of the mechanics. I think the only thing I wish was changed a little bit was the AI often does extremely baffling decisions, but in terms of what you can do in the game, what kind of history is inside of it, and what kind of units can be produced, and what kind of strengths and weaknesses go with different civilizations. It's all extremely fascinating and helps you actually learn a little bit about history, while also getting you entirely sucked into a game that you can't stop playing because it's just so much fun, both single player and multiplayer. Hollow Knight, a game that kept me incredibly glued to the screen because it's just so enjoyable to look at, learn about, listen to, and of course is very, very, very difficult to play, so if you look away for 1 second, you just might die. Frankly, I kind of feel like I'm in a bit of an abusive relationship with the game because I have so much love and care for it, but it just kicks me in the nuts over and over again every boss fight. I cannot beat this game. I got to a certain boss that I just had to simply decide, you know what? The game has won. I can't beat this. Very rarely does that happen. I will stop playing games because they're not fun anymore. I stopped playing this game because I genuinely cannot. I just can't. My fingers, I'm not capital G epic gamer enough for that. So I might not ever beat this game, but gosh dang, is the art style incredible, the lore, the mechanics of fighting bosses just feel like so much fun. A game that I absolutely love, despite me never being able to actually experience the end of it. Skyrim, a game that's been out so long and re-released so many times that it's actually very easily to take for granted. But if you can go back and think of your first time playing Skyrim, I'm sure you'd put it relatively high in your list as well, because it's a very influential game, not just in the industry, but also to individual players. When this game first came out, we had not seen an open world quite to this scale, and it really cracked open what the genre of open world means and what it has to be. And definitely Skyrim fell short of certain open world aspects. I don't mean to say it's a perfect open world game. Its ability to showcase a quantity of things to do that's as large as it showcased is absolutely incredible and paved the way to adding more and more content to larger scale games like this. It proved, hey, you can actually make this happen. Open world games can be like this. And it's tremendously fun. I still play it every once in a while. It's not the most clean worlds out there. It's not the prettiest thing to look at. And that first playthrough just speaks volumes. And sometimes one playthrough is enough to overshadow 100 playthroughs of a lesser game. Which is why I put Skyrim so high, because it truly is an incredible game. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Some of my favorite atmosphere in a Zelda game to this day, and that even includes some 3D ones where you have kind of an advantage going in. One of my favorite moments of A Link to the Past is when you first enter the Dark World and the game just opens up to you and you start seeing all these other dungeons show up on your map. The Dark World theme is very desolate, but also there's this sense of hero hope that really makes you feel like the hero of the story. And I remember my first time getting to that point in this game and figuring out it's actually a much larger legend than I originally thought it was. I really felt like Hyrule needs me. I need to do this for Hyrule. I'm in the Dark World right now. I need to do it for Hyrule. I think there's some dungeons that are agony, some boss fights that are agony, but still my favorite 2D Zelda, and it's going to be a while before that one gets topped. Kirby Air Ride, one of the only other Kirby games I played, but also an absolute blast of a time. Pretty much everything about this game I love. Love the music, I love the charm, I love the rare gameplay format of exploring an overworld for collectibles to encounter a random challenge. Pretty much the only thing we've ever seen that's similar to that is in Sakurai's other game, Smash Brothers for 3DS, where we had Smash Run, which I already talked about. While the racing itself is actually relatively lackluster, the amount of player versus player going on just in the hub world to collect items is enough to carry fun throughout whatever the minigame might actually be. And of course, just running around in free run is a lot of fun sometimes. Pokemon Crystal. This game is very special to me because it's actually the first game that I owned completely to myself. My grandfather got it for me, as well as a Game Boy Advance a long, long time ago. And I played the heck out of this game on that Game Boy Advance. Still one of my favorite Pokemon games, and has some mechanics that you don't actually see in many others. One of my favorite things was just being able to call trainers that would slowly level up their Pokemon so that you could train off of them. Kind of a neat mechanic. Even if getting phone calls randomly wasn't super fun. For some reason, the capturing of Suicune, though, just felt a lot more legendary to me than some of the other legendary Pokemon. And of course, this game also had the 2 maps with its own set of gyms, which just brought a lot of content into the game. And some of my favorite Pokemon is still from the 2nd generation. So mostly a nostalgic piece for me, but also just a really solid Pokemon entry, and has a lot of things that I missed from the Pokemon series. Super Mario 64, a game that I played quite a bit as a child. Definitely lacking modern mechanics. But as it stood when it came out, it was absolutely revolutionary. You don't need me to tell you that. It just left such an impact that I remember so many inches of that game. So many random things that I wouldn't think that I would remember. Which makes it just one of my favorites to think of and stuff. However, there is another game that I'm very nostalgic for that's a little bit more mechanically sound, and that is Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo DS. I don't think a lot of people would actually put this game higher than the original. But the truth is just the introduction of more characters, as well as just me playing at an older age where I understand the mechanics of the game more, just gives a more sound experience and also allows me to have more nostalgia for it. And is honestly just, it's obviously not a hidden gem because it is a Mario game and it's Mario 64 remake, but it's a game that really deserves a little bit more praise because the amount of content they added to this game really makes it stand up against the original, in addition to some mini games, which is really neat, as well as different characters and cool mechanics with hats. Frankly, just a really solid experience. The only thing holding it back is that it didn't have analog movement because it was DS. It's a tremendously solid title that really deserves a remake at some point. Please, Nintendo, can we get that on a home console? Be absolutely incredible. Left 4 Dead 2, one of the games that I've probably recorded the most on YouTube other than Minecraft. I just love the cinematic approach to this game. The characters are really neat and the multiplayer is just a lot of fun. Whether you do co-op or even the PvP stuff can be pretty cool. There's a lot of different episodes that you can play, each with their own neat voice acting that goes into it. Even if a lot of it's just hack and slash, for some reason, it's never really felt that repetitive to me. And I think that's just because you always have a friend with you who makes the experience feel a little bit more unique. So definitely one of my favorites. Metroid Prime, an absolutely incredible game, and still not the only Prime you're going to find on this list. Metroid Prime kind of did the impossible when it comes to translating a 2D game into a 3D game, and in my opinion, executed it extremely well. There's a couple things that didn't get ironed out until later entries in the series, but for the most part, the way Metroid Prime creates a world that you just want to explore every inch of is absolutely mind-boggling. I just don't know how they managed to make such beautiful worlds with such beautiful music, with such great incentive to actually explore them. I don't know how they tied that all up into one package so nicely, because it truly is an incredible world exploring experience. There's a fair amount of backtracking that kind of sets it back a little bit in my rankings, to the point where it takes a long time to really get to where you need to be. But that's no match for the level of isolation immersion that you get from this game. That's unmatched by many other games, including Metroid Prime 3, which we already talked about, hence why this one's so high on the list. Absolutely incredible. Mindustry. This one's another niche one, but it's a tower defense game that relies heavily on resource management through conveyor belts and machinery, and a lot of it is actually too big brain for my tiny brain. But it's actually a ton of fun to play. The game actually does a really good job at slowly introducing mechanics to you before you fully understand at least a tenth of them. Its multiplayer is also a lot of fun, both cooperative and PvP. Mindustry just creates a strange level of intensity with resource management and tower defense building, and a cool mix of genres that I don't see super often, but also lets me addicted for many months, actually. I plan on coming back to it at some point because it's just tremendously fun. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D. I'm going to keep this one relatively short because most things I said about Ocarina of Time still apply to this one. But really, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is just, for me, having that faster paced style Zelda game, while also having a really neat level of time management, makes me actually enjoy the game more than Ocarina of Time. I also just love collecting the different masks. They're very cool collectibles that offer some neat gameplay changes, as well as just making your collectibles have kind of a cool visual aspect to them. And also we have to mention just the darker tone that Majora's Mask takes, that makes it much more thrilling than some other Zelda titles, but also makes you really care for the characters a lot more than you might for other ones. Even the main character, Link, I'm not sure if I cared about Link as much as I've cared about Link in Majora's Mask, because homie just gets dealt such a bad hand. But it's tremendously fun, and the 3DS aids it very well. Time Splitters Future Perfect. This is the third Time Splitters game in the Time Splitters series. You could honestly replace this with Time Splitters 2. They kind of go hand in hand. Future Perfect I just probably enjoy a little bit more. But basically Time Splitters is just a really fun, fast-paced multiplayer shooter. One that my friends and I have played quite a bit. It has this level of, I know I've said this a lot, but this level of charm that's not seen in a lot of first-person shooters that are as kind of gritty looking as Time Splitters. But also there's just a lot of humor to it. The amount of care that they put into this game is also very visible in pretty much every corner. It's one of those games that's just incredibly polished from pretty much any way you look at it. And it's also completely ridiculous, which is so much fun. Definitely my favorite ridiculous shooter to play, especially with other people. But it also has a super solid campaign that's cooperative. Hello, awesome, right? Super Mario Odyssey, a game that has somehow managed to be the most mechanically sound 3D platformer to have exist. If in terms of jumping, I've never felt a game that feels so good than it is to jump in Mario Odyssey, which is quite saying a lot. I've played quite a few 3D platformers. I think the only thing that hinders my experience with Super Mario Odyssey is the way it handles star collecting, as well as some of the worlds that feel a little bit more lackluster. But for the most part, I've never wanted to jump off of a building in so many different ways than in Mario. That sounds a little bit weird. Parkour off a building in so many different ways than I have in this Mario game. The fact that you can just collect an item through pretty much any pathway you want to take, and through whatever kind of jumps you want to do, and the game just encourages you to be creative in your exploration, just makes a incredibly satisfying experience for every collectible that you get, except for the ones that are super easy to get, which kind of brings it to my problem with some of the collectibles. But for the most part, I would not trade my Mario Odyssey experience for many other experiences out there. Portal 2. Words cannot describe how much fun I've had with this game, both as a child and also as a young adult with my buddy Owl, one of our first Let's Play series together. It introduces a really cool multiplayer that actually overlaps with the single player campaign. Both stories kind of run in conjunction, but they also offer two completely different sets of levels. And playing by yourself versus playing with another person already changes the gameplay quite a bit for Portal, because your level of management and screen peeking changes, and that really changes how you approach puzzles. But really cool storyline, and really great cooperative, and also really good single player. But it also has workshop levels that you can load up from the community, so it's really hard to actually get bored of this game. Highly recommend that. If for whatever reason you haven't played Portal 2 yet, it is absolutely wonderful. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, similar to Team Fortress 2, it's kind of hard to look at this game as a full package instead of just where it's at currently. Because where it's at currently, it has some interesting ranking decisions and not the best player base, but ultimately, if you kind of set that aside and look at just the level of quality that's put into the mechanics of the game itself, you'll find a competitive experience that has been unmatched by pretty much any other first-person shooter out there. There's a reason CSGO still exists really high in the esports community, and that's just because on a competitive level, they have figured out how to make things honestly tremendously fair. I know hardcore CSGO players are gonna be like, how could you even call this game fair? And it's like, I get it, but look, when you compare it to other games, the minuscule differences that make things unfair in this game are just that, minuscule, compared to like things like freaking Mario Kart, where it's no competitive value. But I don't know, there's something really cool about the way it handles its team play, its economy, the simplicity in its maps, and pretty much simplicity in everything that it takes. Just gets down to the raw gameplay, and it handles the raw gameplay very, very well. It's a really good title, one that I personally don't play a ton anymore because I've played it so much. And again, the game's just not in an incredibly great spot with its current community, but the game itself, if you break it down to the gameplay, really, really good gameplay. Gets to the point, simple, very easy to understand, very fun to watch. Just a great game overall. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You could also honestly replace this with the original Mario Kart 8 because I probably had an equal amount of fun with both. There's not much differences to them, but the small changes in the addition of an actual battle mode to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe makes this one stand out a little bit more over the Wii U version. It's just made everything in Mario Kart right. Like, they did Mario Kart great, and there's nothing wrong with it. But honestly, the big thing that Mario Kart 8 does is the introduction of online multiplayer. I understand that there's a level of couch play elitism that can come with Mario Kart. And I don't even necessarily mean that in a bad way. I totally get that playing with your friends on a couch is such a great way to play Mario Kart. But as we get older, those opportunities just start becoming fewer and fewer. Unfortunately, that's usually the way it goes. Honestly, is probably the best online experience on the Nintendo Switch because Nintendo handles its online really bad. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, pretty simple selection, but it works well for this list. Not gonna lie, I'm getting so tired. I'm getting tremendously tired. This is a long video, but we're getting through it. We've now reached number 10. Let's get on to number 10. Woo! Number 10 is Super Mario World. One of the first games I have actual memory of playing, could very well be my first actual game. I think this game just mechanically holds up so well to this day and has truly earned the title of a timeless experience, because every time I go back to play this game, it is just so much fun. I've actually started this game over so many times, and believe it or not, through my many years of playing, I've never actually beaten it, but there's a reason for that. This kind of goes back to what I said about the original Zelda, but I don't really want to look up how to beat these old games because I just kind of want to experience them as they are in an internal way. In the case of Super Mario World, I've never actually made it outside the Forest of Illusion because the only pathway I've unlocked is a secret one. And I just don't feel like using the secret way out to beat the game because I want to experience it without the secret paths. But also, I think there's a part of me that wants to never beat this game because as long as this game remains unbeaten, I will always have a game that is near perfect that I can still play, you know? So I think part of me is in it for the long haul and having a game that I can just constantly pick up and never have to worry about beating and need to put it down because I can just keep it in the back of my mind. Hey, here's a game that you still haven't beat. You've always got something to play. Undertale, a game that handles its storytelling extremely well and is the first game that has made me actually care about the actions that I do in a game, as well as a game that really makes me care about the other characters. It kind of showed me just how powerful an interactive medium can be in a storytelling world. We've been thrown choices and options in narrative-driven games in the past, but most of them are actually pretty superfluous. The options take us to the same spot. This is the first game that truly shows you what you can do with interactive-based choices in storytelling games. And because of that, gosh dang, it's just a lot of fun. But also just mixing the bullet hell style gameplay with the kind of slower paced RPG mechanics is a really nice package that basically leaves a little bit of something for all of me to play and enjoy and very much feel through. It's a feely game, and that's just great to say. Star Wars Battlefront 2, one of my favorite multiplayer games. Still play it to this day all the time. I think out of every multiplayer game on this list, except for a few that we'll talk about in a bit, this is one I've played the most. I've got buddies who will also play with me pretty much anytime I ask them to. It's basically great for all the same things that the original Star Wars Battlefront was as well, except for the Galactic Conquest has actually expanded a little bit more. It's just such a cool game mode that you don't see in a lot of modern games, and I don't really understand why, because the premise is all here. It just needs a little bit better execution. But exploring the different maps and using the different classes in those maps has never been more fun in a Star Wars environment, and it still holds up stronger than the EA remakes to this day, in my personal opinion. Spoiler alert, there's none of the EA Battlefronts in this list, okay? The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. Now, again, this is one of those games that you could probably put the original on the spot, but the HD version adds some quality of life changes that are nice, as well as just beautiful graphics that, despite actually releasing almost 10 years ago at this point, still hold up pretty well today, just given the art style of Wind Waker. I just love the legend of this one, and I love the exploration of the seas and just charting the islands on your sea chart, as well as just all of the really cool characters and mini games that you get to experience in this game. Definitely the biggest issue is just how slow the beginning is, I feel. Could also have used one or two more dungeons to really make the game more bulky, but honestly, pretty much nothing can compare to the legend that awaits in the sea when you're exploring. It was really an early form of open world games that wasn't really common at the time. And to this day, I think I will remember this game with nothing but fond memories. And I actually started replaying it just again recently, and I've just been loving my time with it so far. And oh my gosh, the music. The music. I think the music in Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda music to have ever been in a game, and that's saying a lot because Zelda has great music. But an absolutely tremendous title that will stay in my memory and my heart, and hopefully in my hands for much longer to come. Pikmin 2, the final Pikmin game that will be in my list, and one of the last Pikmin games, other than Pikmin Go, obviously. Oh, and Pikmin Bloom. Don't play Pikmin Bloom. What we're talking about today, though, is Pikmin 2. I don't know how I can describe how much I love this game. Earlier, when I was talking about this level of genre bending to introduce something that you can't experience from other things, that still holds true in Pikmin 2, but in a much lengthier game with just so many knickknacks to collect and so many bizarre enemies to fight, and I just love every second of it. How much more can I describe it? It's just fun. It's so much fun. The music, the seeing everything in a minuscule size, finding even just the silly names the rocket gives to the treasures, the introduction of white Pikmin and purple Pikmin that are both just super fun to use. I don't know how I can explain much more that I like this game other than the battle mode, which is still one of my favorite multiplayer experiences to this day. Personally, my favorite way to play this game is through the new play controls on the Wii. I think pointing at the screen to throw your Pikmin works tremendously well, and frankly, lost some of its touch in the Switch Deluxe version of Pikmin 3, not having the pointer controls, because it works extremely well. But Pikmin 2 basically knocks everything out of the park. Its challenge mode is also great. Everything about it's great. It's a great game. It's as simple as that. All right, fellas, I'm extremely tired. I've talked a lot. I want to go to bed, but we've officially reached number 5 on my list, which is Super Metroid. Super Metroid is a game that I actually have less nostalgia for than a lot of the other Metroids, but I was in sheer awe when I picked up this game from pretty much every screen that I walked through. Just the level of atmospheric music and variety in boss, just the level of atmospheric music and variety in tile sets and enemies and strange lighting effects that I didn't know was possible in a 2D environment just makes this game absolutely incredible. And honestly, if I were to ever call a game absolutely perfect and flawless, it's so close to going to Super Metroid. There's been so many 2D Metroid games after this, but for some reason none of them have been able to capture the Super Metroid feel of just complete isolation mixed with beautiful music that's sometimes daunting, and it's sometimes peaceful, it's sometimes just ambient, and all of which really fit together. I'm not sure what else I can say except this game just checks pretty much every box in the good game list. Which is why it sits at a very respectable spot at number 5 on my list. But it also is not the only Metroid game on my list. We'll get to that one later. Number 4 goes to none other than The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I genuinely thought there was never going to be a Zelda game that I would enjoy more than Wind Waker. And then Breath of the Wild came out and just blew every expectation I had for it out of the water. And it didn't just blow my expectations for this game in particular, but it also blew my expectations for what an open world game can be. I didn't think that I would ever be this interested in an open world until I played Breath of the Wild, which has a world that I want to explore under every rock looking for freaking Koroks. I genuinely wanted to see every bit of landscape, and the game makes traversing the landscape so much more fun than I've seen in other open world games. Just with tools like the hang glider and climbing in the towers, it never feels burdensome to explore these beautiful sights. I also actually really like the shrine mechanics. Having the individual puzzles placed all over the map gives you reason to actually explore things, and most of the puzzles are just a lot of fun. And also, as much as I love classic Zelda music, the piano commentary that's going on in this game is just, it works marvelously well for the atmosphere it's trying to create. Also, Ganondorf's castle, oh my gosh, just so much fun. It kind of feels like a classic Zelda dungeon, except for multiplied by 3. And the music that plays on the inside and the outside is so tremendous and challenging. And oh my gosh, the Lionels are scary as all get out. And I just love this game. It's great. It's incredible. Somehow dethroned Wind Waker for my favorite Zelda title. It's absolutely amazing. Number 3 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I've had other Smash Bros. Games on this list. In fact, I think I've had all of the other Smash Bros. Games on this list. But Ultimate truly is the ultimate Smash experience. So much reason to play the game for hours after hours, and so much replay value. How can you argue with the sheer amount of characters that all have like an equal level of time and care put into them? I do think some of the single player options are a little bit weak, but it's hard to even credit that against the game when the multiplayer is so strong. And ultimately, what is Smash more about? It's the multiplayer, and the multiplayer is just irreplaceable in Smash Ultimate. I have a feeling I'll still be playing this game long after the next one comes out, because there's no way that Ultimate can just be just another Smash entry. It's got to stand the test of time, and it absolutely will. So Ultimate probably has a permanent spot as number 3 on my list. Number 2 is Minecraft, and this one's actually pretty tough to compliment without stating things that haven't already been said so many times. But this game, both at its core and what it has evolved into, are both equally great, and has allowed for a level of creativity that I've not experienced in any other game before. It's actually largely responsible for me feeling like I might actually be a relatively creative person. I was playing this before I had selected my current major in college, and it basically acted as an outlet for me to be creative. And then suddenly I actually everything I do is basically creating things now. So it kind of opened me up as an artist, and just as a base gameplay, nothing has been as fun to explore as Minecraft, and nothing has been as fun to build in as Minecraft, and nothing has been as fun that's been built inside of Minecraft, because Minecraft is more than just a game. It's a platform for other people to use their creativity to build their own games and their own buildings and their own amazing sites. Minecraft just truly is a one-of-a-kind game, and definitely the game that I've replayed the most over my time on this earth. But as I mentioned earlier, sometimes that first playthrough is more than 100 in another, and my number 1 game definitely had a tremendous first playthrough and second and every other playthrough that I've done. My number 1 game goes to Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. I will admit a fair amount of nostalgia goes into the exact placement of the number 1 spot for this one. This was the first Metroid game that I played independently from my family, and it really added to that isolation feeling that Metroid does so well with. But also exploring the worlds of Aether and its dark counterparts, I always found very fascinating, because they have the usual Metroid charm in the world building, but then they've still found a way to make the dark version of the world interesting to traverse. I definitely don't think Metroid Prime 2 Echoes is perfect, and there's actually probably some games before it that are considerably higher quality than Metroid Prime 2. But the place it holds in my heart just kind of goes down to really introducing me to my love for the Metroid franchise, as well as just showing me how much fun single player games can be. The truth is that video games run off of our emotions. The only reason video games are made, and the reason that we're buying them, is because we have emotional reactions to them. And that's because every person's interaction with the game is based on an individual level. It's something that is not entirely replicated by anyone else's interaction, because not everybody shares the same emotions, the same backgrounds, the same perspectives. So that's kind of the power of a single player game, is that it's a more intimate experience where you're experiencing something for your enjoyment of the game and your enjoyment of the game alone. You're not influenced by external factors and other people playing and communities and things like that. When you just sit down and play a single player game and just experience it as a viewer to the art that you're looking at or playing or experiencing or interacting with, you just get an experience that is so personalized and intimate that you're not going to get when you're playing with other people. That's not to say you shouldn't play with other people. It's not to say that single player is better than multiplayer. I'm just saying that this is the game that really opened me up to that. It's when I learned I don't need to have the same opinions on games as people directly next to me. I can genuinely come up with my own experiences because I played this game and experienced something that no one else did. Because that's what art does. It creates intimate experiences with every individual audience member, and Metroid Prime 2 was that piece of art that it did to me. So that's why it's very important to me. It's also just a really fun game. What can I say? It's incredibly fun. It's Metroid. It's the usual. That's all. I am oh so tremendously tired. I don't know how long this video is, but the recording is past 2 hours. So I'm going to go to sleep pretty soon. But thank you for watching. This has been in development for about a year now. Also, it's worth mentioning, I did say last year that I was done making YouTube videos. There's a possibility I'm back. I don't want to give any promises as to what extent that is true. But I really missed it. It's really what it comes down to. I graduated, I got some more free time, and I just missed making YouTube videos. So I'm gonna start making more YouTube videos. I don't know how much, we'll just see. But if you would like to support my efforts in creating more videos and just be as a creator in general, you can always buy my shirt, Finches Get Stinches, or Ask the Mask, both collections over at beunified.com, link in the description, all hand designed and illustrated by yours truly. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.